So what are omega fats? Now, they're generally speaking, these omega fats are fats that are considered to be essential. What does essential mean? Essential means that your body cannot produce them. You have to eat them. And so you can't eat other kinds of fats, and your body make omegas 3 and 6 from those other kinds of fat. In essence, you have to eat them from your diet. And we'll talk about food sources here in just a minute. But the two primary types of polyunsaturated fats are omega-3 and omega-6. And the term poly means multiple. Unsaturated means that their carbon bonds are not saturated with hydrogen. We're not going to go into the depth of chemistry because I don't think it will serve most of you. But it's important to understand that the more unsaturated a fat is, so this poly, the more susceptible the fat is to oxidation. Meaning, this is important, especially if you're trying to do supplements with omega-3 fatty acid supplemental pills. A lot of supplements, and I see this, is that manufacturers are guilty of this all the time. You'll see a bottle, and it'll be a clear bottle, like a plastic clear bottle on the outside, and the fat is in it, and you can see the fat. And a lot of your major box stores, I see this all the time, where they'll be like selling omega-3 fats in bulk, these big old bottles with clear plastic you can see right through. And the problem with that is because polyunsaturated fats like omega-3 are susceptible to oxidation, they're also susceptible to light and oxygen. So oxidation from oxygen, light and oxygen, right? So anytime you have a see-through bottle, if you're buying a supplement at the grocery store and it's a see-through bottle, run away. Don't buy it. You're wasting your money, because the likelihood that that product is going to be oxidized, meaning rancid, you're going to get rancid fish oil, and you take rancid fish oil, number one, you're going to burp a ton of fish, and it's going to taste disgusting. And number two, you're eating oxidized fats, which will act like free radicals. So it's very, very important that you're not taking a supplement to improve your health, but actually taking a poor, inferior supplement that is oxidized, that is leading to, again, a free radical bombardment, when you're trying to help your body. So again, if you see a clear bottle, this is why you'll see a lot of my products are in dark glass bottles. There's a reason for this. A lot of times those dark glass bottles are to keep out the light, right? And the tight seal around the lip is to keep out the oxygen, right? So it's to prevent that omega-3 from breaking down. One of the other things that you'll find in a good omega-3 fatty acid supplement is you'll find that it contains antioxidants in the formula. So there will be some type of antioxidant substance. That antioxidant is there to protect the fat from oxidation, right? So again, polyunsaturated fats, omega-3 and omega-6 are the two types. And again, most people will not supplement omega-6. It's a waste of money. If you're supplementing omega-6, stop, unless it's a very specific kind. We'll get into that in a moment. But predominantly, if you're looking to supplement the diet in Western culture, this is what needs to be supplemented. And you want to make sure your bottles are either solid, with not allowing light in, or dark glass, not allowing light in, and sealed very well, but also contain other antioxidants. Some common antioxidants found in some fish oil products are things like rosemary or tocotrienols or alpha lipoic acid or vitamin E. These are just examples of antioxidants that are commonly added to omega-3 to protect them from deteriorating and oxidizing before you get to use them. So you've got omega-3 and you've got omega-6. And then we also have over here under monounsaturated as a type of omega fat, because these are all 3, 6, and 9 are all considered omega fats. Omega-3, omega-6, and omega-9. And so omega-9 is generally not something you'll want to supplement with either. Again, we'll talk more in detail about the differences and the nuances between these different types of fats here in just a minute. So there are different types or subtypes, if you will. When we're talking about omega-3 and we're talking about omega-6, there are subtypes of these fats. And so it's important that you understand to a certain extent, and we're not going to have a test after the end of this crash course, but it's important to kind of understand what you're looking at. Again, if you're trying to supplement, if you're trying to figure out how to supplement or what to supplement with, knowing some of this knowledge is going to be very helpful. EPA, DHA, and ALA are the 3 types of omega-3, subtypes of omega-3 fat. Now, ALA generally is plant-based. Again, generally speaking, things like chia, flax provide ALA. And then you have EPA and DHA, which your body can convert ALA into EPA. But predominantly EPA comes from fatty fish. You can get some omega-3 as well from grass-fed beef. And again, same thing here, DHA, predominantly fatty fish. We'll talk about other dietary sources shortly, but again, you've got to eat these things. And so I've seen the cases where a lot of times where people hate fish, or they're allergic to fish, and so they avoid it like the plague, and they're really struggling to get adequate quantities of omega-3. And we'll talk about some of the symptoms that those people experience here in just a minute. And then we have omega-6, and there's 2 primary forms of omega-6, linoleic acid, or LA here, and then gamma-linoleic acid here. And so we'll talk more again about those in just a minute. But most of your omega-6s are derived from, in the American diet anyway, are derived from plant-based sources. So some of the key functions of omega fats. So we know omega-3 fatty acids, as an example, support cardiovascular health, and a lot of this is through regulation and modulation of inflammation, and so they protect us from overproducing inflammation. We also know that these fats have an effect on blood thickness or blood viscosity. So it's important to understand that. We'll talk more about why in just a minute. So support healthy brain function and cognition. A lot of your brain tissue, especially in the developing fetus, developing fetus need a lot more omega-3 for that developing neurological system for the brain, the spinal cord to properly develop. But cognitive function, and this in adults, healthy brain function and cognition, maintaining a healthy inflammatory response, and then again, there are other functions for it. There's some research studies that show that it's very, very beneficial in a number of key types of conditions, like people that struggle with cardiovascular issues like high triglycerides, and there's even some research talking about omega-3's effect on LDL, which is LDL, low-density lipoprotein, which is a form of cholesterol. And although I'm not a big fan of demonizing cholesterol like many doctors are, some people ask me, what's a natural way to lower the cholesterol? This is one of the best ways in the world right here to support healthy cholesterol levels is omega-3 fatty acids. As a matter of fact, it's one of the few things known to man that can lower your LDL and lower your triglycerides simultaneously. So very, very effective in that way. Some key functions of omega-6. Now, a lot of times, just like when people talk about cholesterol, they talk about good and bad. Even though there's no such thing as good or bad, they're all important. Your body won't make something or won't need something essentially if it's bad. It needs it. So it's not necessarily about good or bad. But a lot of people look at omega-3 fats as good. And so, again, I want to break that spell of thinking it in that way. And they look at omega-6 as bad. And so although this isn't true, it's the ratio at which you achieve levels in your body. So where most people are in the United States is their levels of omega-6 are too high and their levels of omega-3 are too low. It's not that one is good or bad, it's that there's this massive imbalance or shift in the wrong direction that leads to bad things. So keep that in mind. Now, omega-6 are important for a lot of things. They provide energy, they help stimulate the skin and hair growth, so hair loss being one of the symptoms of deficiency. They maintain bone health. They regulate your overall metabolic function and metabolism. They're very, very important, specifically speaking for thyroid hormone. So again, how bad could they be when they help your thyroid hormone and your metabolism? And then they maintain the reproductive system. So the reproductive system in females, meaning help with fertility. It's very hard for a female to become pregnant when they're low or deficient in omega fatty acids. And then we have omega-9. This actually should be a 9 right here. Omega-9 fatty acids. There's research that shows that omega-9s help with insulin sensitivity, aid in the permeability of cell membranes, and then help maintain brain and nerve health. Now, I want to talk in a little bit more depth about what this second one means in the aiding in the permeability of cell membranes. So let's draw a picture here. Okay, so this is obviously it's a cell. This is the outer membrane. And these are sometimes referred to as, if you ever took biology in school, as a phospholipid membrane. Okay, and if we were to blow up a picture of what that looks like, it would kind of look like and if you get out an old biology textbook, you'll see something that looks kind of like this. So if we were to take like a cross-section of this wall and blow it up and expand it out, it would look something like this. And so kind of the way this works is this membrane separates the outside of the cell from the inside of the cell. But this membrane has within it a number of different receptors that are embedded and channels that are embedded within it. And this is how things from the outside can get into the inside. And so what happens if you don't have enough omega-9, so again, we're talking about omega-9 fatty acids. One of the primary forms of omega-9 is something called oleic acid. And so if you don't have enough, then the cell membrane, which is semi-permeable, I'm going to give you a visual example. If you ever if you ever done the experiment where you poured oil and water into the same cup, and ultimately what happens is the oil floats at the surface, the water floats below, and that's because water and oil don't mix, right? We've all heard that kind of cliche saying, and it's true inside your cells, and that's why this fatty membrane separates the inside water from the outside water. But again, there are all kinds of receptors, like there's hormone receptors embedded in your membrane. There's channels and pores embedded in this membrane. And what happens, kind of the way this might look, is imagine, let's just alter our drawing a little bit here. Imagine there's a receptor embedded in this membrane, and it kind of sits, and it has like a receptor structure, and it kind of moves through the membrane, so that what happens is if a chemical comes into contact with that receptor, it can send a message through the membrane inside the cell. And generally that message, it comes inside the cell and it communicates to the DNA. And that's how your cells know what to do, so that a lot of your membrane has different receptors that are embedded within it. And they serve in this function to allow things in or out of the cell and have a proper check and balance. So if you're low in oleic acid, this membrane, so going back to that example, when you pour water and oil into a cup together, you get a semi-permeable layer of liquidous fat on top as you get water on the bottom. So imagine when you pour like a vegetable oil in that cup of water, that vegetable oil is, for the most part, it's not fully saturated, so it's an unsaturated oil, much like oleic acid, which is a monounsaturated fat. What that means to you is, at room temperature, the oil is a liquid. If you were to take the temperature and drop the temperature down, we might see that fat turns more into a hard substance, much like you see with animal fats. When at higher temperatures they turn into a liquid, you can make a gravy with them, but at lower temperatures they actually start to solidify, and you see that white fat. That's because they're more saturated. But what happens when you're low in oleic acid is this membrane becomes more like a saturated fat, meaning it actually can become more rigid and more stiff, right? So the permeability of this membrane becomes affected. So things can't get inside the cell as well, and waste can't get outside the cell. So some of the waste gets trapped, and so you get toxicity intracellularly with a lack of things being able to come in and communicate with the cell. So lack of oleic acid causes this membrane to be more like, imagine Crisco. If you were a kid and you ever saw that hardened vegetable oil, that solid trans fat, imagine your cell membranes being more rigid and more hard and that not having that permeability. That's what happens when you have an oleic acid or omega-9 fatty acid deficiency. And so what this leads to symptomatically is it leads to a reduction, it reduces the function of hormones, because a lot of these receptors embedded in your cell membrane are hormone receptors. So you could be making the perfect amount of hormones, but if the receptors can't get the message through the cell wall because it's too rigid, then you get a dampened hormone response. So it reduces the functionality of your hormones potentially, and that's not a good thing. So it's a very important fat, and we don't want to leave it out of our diets for that reason. Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below, and as always, thanks for tuning in.